Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. For the first time ever, we're gonna do something a little bit different uh, on this channel, something we've never done. We're going to actually not mourn the death of a not a famous person per se, but I would say an infamous person. We're going to say on this channel that karma was indeed served with the passing of this individual. Hey, Lisa, what's going on? And that is Bryant Donham. For those who don't know, this is the woman who in 1955 falsely accused 15-year-old teenager Emmett Till of whistling at her while she worked at a store, which resulted in his kidnapping and brutal beating and his body being discarded in the Tascalachie River in the small town of Monet, Mississippi. Um, she reported that Till had done this um, to her husband and his half brother, and the husband and half brother. And he kidnapped Till, who was in town visiting a family. He was from Chicago, and the things that they did to him, how they mutilated his face, how they mutilated his body, just unspeakable um, horrors. Crazy to think about. And then years later, she comes out and she says that it was all a lie, that he never did that. You know what I mean? She falsely accused this young man of what at that time whistling at a white woman was a heinous crime. Because isn't it true that that's really what racism is all? Racism in the United States is really always been based on the fear of genetic annihilation that some racist white people have towards black people. They don't want black men to date white women, or they fear that black men may mate with white women, and that will lead to their genetic annihilation. So, knowing this, she preyed on this fear, and for some perverse reason, maybe she liked Emmett Till. She was in her 20s at the time. He was 15 years old. But maybe she was interested in Emmett and he wasn't interested in her. But for some perverse reason, she falsely accused him, knowing in her mind what would happen if she did this. You know what I mean? Knowing the reaction of the men around her. Wasn't the first time this happened. There were several race riots like Rosewood that were caused just from this mere incident. Just a black man in the South just speaking or whistling or talking to or looking at a white woman. In fact, the 1915 movie Birth of a Nation is actually based on this premise um, of the idea that the KKK was resurrected after the Civil War, ex-Confederate generals to protect the innocence of white womanhood. That's what the whole idea of racism is basically based on, to protect white women from black men. And she knew her stupid ass knew what would happen if she did this, and she did it anyway. So anyway, years later, it was discovered house where she wasn't indicted. Evidence that she was guilty of this crime, but she still wasn't indicted, and for some she was let off years later. What I had to say to this is I never been glad that someone died, but in this case, I got to say I'm glad that that she fucking died, because she was just a deplorable human being. One good thing though came out of this whole situation, if you can say that anything came out of this situation, was that Emmett Till's mom decided when his body was shipped back uh, to Chicago to still have an open casket and to release the photos of his mutilated body. And what that did was that galvanized a lot of African Americans to a lot of African Americans to say, you know what, enough is enough of this BS, and we're going to um, enough is enough, and it's time for a change, and that really galvanized the civil rights movement in the mid 1950s. Just the horrificness of this action. So, if any good would come of that, that's what would come of it. Was that it was such a horrific. It was similar to what Trayvon Martin's death in 2012. It was or Rodney King, the Rodney King beating. It helped bring attention to racial justice in a way that it had not been brought attention to before in several decades. Like I always say, every 20 years there is a spike in racial consciousness because it never really stops. It goes dormant for a while. It's like cancer. Um, Racism truly is the cancer of American society. You know how like cancer can be, hey Lisa, what's going on? Cancer can be in remission for a little while, and lay dormant, but then it will rise up again, you know, and have flare ups, and you'll have episodes. That's right. She was the first Karen, but her actions were far worse than any Karen had ever had happened to her. But not really, because I take that back. Because in the 1980s, you had the beatings in Howard Beach. In the 1990s, you had Yusuf Hawkins beatings, the Yusuf Hawkins murder. So, and you had the Central Park Five in the 1980s. So, this happened before Emmett Till. This happened. Emmett Till was an example of this. This happened after Emmett Till, and this continues to happen even today. The idea that a, a, a black man will somehow steal a white woman from white men infuriates white men to such a degree that they are willing to commit heinous acts of murder. We've seen it in American history throughout. Famous cases, like I said, Howard Beach in 1989, Yusuf Hawkins in the early 1990s. It just, the entire system is predicated on, the entire racially biased system is predicated on that premise that we have to keep, they have to keep their women away.
I waited till 6. I heard you talking, but I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, I was listening. I was listening. I heard the man's voice. You got to yell. No. I know I'm up there, like 50 already. I'm so sorry. What I was going to say, you know, yeah, but really, no, because I think they didn't do it right, the dentist. Oh, awesome. I could have when it first got infected, yeah. But now. But that could be one time. Yeah. My whole shit like this. I was going pus, oh my God, yo. And I went and then they opened it up and they put gouge in it. And, oh my God, it was like a cyst. But it was bad.
Okay, guys, sorry, I'm back. So, sorry, Lisa, but no, I don't want to end it, Lisa. Somebody came at my door. But anyway, the entire system is predicated on that notion. Like I said, Yusuf Hawkins, uh, Howard Beach, and this. This was like the first modern example because yeah, they had Rosewood and they had Tulsa. That's what the Tulsa race riots of the 1920s was really the cause of. That's what what really sparked it, the impetus, some kind of illicit relationship between a, a white woman and a black man, and that's what caused the destruction of Black Wall Street, Rosewood too. But in those days, they didn't have television, they didn't have large print media, and they didn't have black independent media. A lot of these pictures were posted in magazines like Jet, magazines like Ebony, things, um, media circuits that were focused on African American media, and like I said, it really galvanized the Black Civil Rights movement because the people in the North after the Great Migration, they were kind of twice removed from stuff like this hadn't ever really happened in the North. So the communities in Chicago and stuff like where Emmett was from, they thought shit was all good. You know what I mean? They knew of the racism in the South because their families had escaped it, but they didn't see it was that bad. But when stuff like this stares you in the face, that's why the civil rights movement is so remembered because what those southern governors like Lester Maddox and them did was so egregious. You know, sicking dogs on people, spraying down people with hoses and stuff like that. Things, it's one thing hearing about it. It's one thing, imagining it as a part of the past or hearing your parents talk about it. It's another thing seeing it. The images of his scarred face, the images of his mutilated body was it was like, okay, you can't take this shit anymore, and you know it was time for it to change. Unfortunately, these two white men were acquitted because the trial was done in the South. Of course, Mississippi, the worst. I mean, the absolute. I mean, all Southern states were bad when it came to racism and Jim Crow, but Mississippi was the absolute worst, like, and probably still is the absolute heartland of racism and prejudice in this country. I mean, when Schwammer, Goodman, and Cheney died, a decade later, like in '64, um, which the movie Mississippi Burning is based on, the Freedom Summer. Um, where was it? Mississippi. So all the southern states were bad, but Mississippi was the absolute worst. And the smaller the towns you get, and this is the case in all places in America, the smaller the town, the more dangerous it was and is for people of color, just because that's the way it is. They're less cosmopolitan. They're less exposed to people of different ethnicities, especially um, black folks, and they tend to be more racist. That's why there was the Green Book. If you saw that movie, The Green Book, uh, starring Mahershala Ali, that's why there was the Green Book. Certain places, it was a travel guide for African Americans. Certain places you just did not want to go, and there were sundown towns all throughout the South, where towns where African Americans did not want to be after a certain time of night because for fear of getting hurt, for fear of getting killed. No go zones, where it was understood both by the white population and the black population that this is just not safe. But what I gets under my skin about it, though, is that she lied. You know what I mean? This didn't happen. He didn't do this, and that she was a 21-year-old woman and he was a 15-year-old boy. She had no interest whatsoever. I mean, he had no interest whatsoever in her. You know what I mean? He didn't whistle at her. That was a complete lie, a complete fabrication. And we see women do this all the time. This is the way they make their husbands jealous. But the fact that she known the political implications of what she was doing, it wasn't just a simple case of a woman trying to make their husband jealous with a uh, a false accusation that a man is interested in her on the street or whatever, or that he catcalled. This had political implications. She knew what she was doing, and she did it deliberately. And she was never remorseful. To my knowledge, she was never remorseful. She said it was a different guy and it wasn't Emmett Till. Who cares, bitch? You accused somebody of doing something that they never did just to make your freaking little dick husband, uh, jealous. Lisa saying that the department said the statute of limitations ran out on any potential federal crime, but the FBI worked with state investigators to determine if state charges could be brought. Yeah, but unfortunately, nothing was ever done. It was completely gridlocked because I'm sure, you know, in February of 2007, Mississippi. This is Lisa saying, a February 2007 Mississippi grand jury declined to indict anyone, and the Justice Department announced it was closing the case. Tells you all you need to know. As much as things change, they stay the same. But anyway, we don't need crooked court systems to get justice for this bitch. She has finally gotten justice now. Now she will face her maker, and now she will get what's coming to her for being a lying and deceitful cunt. Peace. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Rest in peace, Emmett Till. Yeah, they tried to put her in prison. Or allegedly they tried. I mean, at least the people did try, I'm sure, but there was a lot of red tape because it was so long ago. And the system was so much more different than it is now. But like I said, she has passed away, and hopefully she gets what's coming to her for what she did. Uh, Rest in peace, Emmett Till. And like I said, this is probably the only video you're ever going to see. I'm going to say something about somebody that's passed away that is completely fucked up, but what she did was completely fucked up. He was 15-year-old and he was a 15-year-old and he was innocent. He didn't do anything to her. She took advantage of what she knew to be the racially unjust system in this country and in the states where she was living in, and she just wanted to play a game and make her husband jealous, and resulting in the brutal death and the brutal mutilation of this young man. But like I said, if there's any positive to ever come out of something like this, it was that it galvanized a whole population to make substantial changes in society. Peace. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to see my next videos coming out. Keep the stars and lights coming, people. Good luck.